What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by DJ Webstar. Basically, this album is called Webstar Presents Caught in the Web, and it came out in the fall of 2006. Now, the thing about this particular album is it's known for the hit single Chicken Noodle Soup, which was a large hit dance throughout the mid-late 2000s and such. It was one of the numerous ones that happened around that time, like the stuff by DJ Unk, Lil Mama, Soulja Boy, Jib, some of those type folks that did that sort of thing. Was definitely, it's kind of snap rap, but the thing about this particular album is it's East Coast. So most of the cats that I reviewed from like the ringtone rap era and snap rap era and that type of stuff came from like the Dirty South. But this particular album is more East Coast tinge and has a lot more kind of stark and minimalist kind of production. It's kind of like if you were to get like a Wu-Tang rapper or like some real super lyrical East Coast cat, someone like Mobb Deep or someone like that, and put them over like some dance beats and just get like a whole damn near album worth of dance cuts. That's probably what you get here. Now, this really, when we talk about it being minimalist, that's very much to like a T on this particular album because there's just one single and no other promotion. There's no explicit version of this album. There are words like ass and damn on here a little bit. There are words like ass and damn on here, but for the most part, this is a pretty edited version of the particular album. You're not going to hear words like niggas and motherfuck and some of those type words, or even pussy or something like that. I just would have to say is just kind of underneath the context of just being able to say it's an obscure kind of project, and I kind of question like it all like DJ Webstar. This isn't the only project he's done. He did at least two other albums, one of which was with Jim Jones and such. But I look at the concept just behind it, just as far as trying to say that it's just surprising that after the breakout hit success of Chicken Noodle Soup, that there was nothing else to kind of follow up this project. It kind of almost labeled him like a one-hit wonder, and he really only has one true other single to his name, or two other true singles to his name out of the three albums that he did. So he has one single off of each of his three albums, and that's just kind of the concept about it. But I particularly like this album. It's very minimalist and stark and just kind of bare bones. But I would have to say I do like enough of this project to kind of hope that there would have been something more towards it. But it's just kind of unfortunate that it's just so very skeletal and kind of just kept to a minimum as far as that kind of goes. But for the most part, I can see folks kind of saying that this album is kind of sketchy just because the concept that so many of the productions on here, this really feels like something ripped out of like 1993. This feels like something that would have happened in like Biggie's lifetime or something like that. Just something amongst more of like a context of getting like stuff that was made in rap music in New York specifically before like 1996 or 1997, something like that. And I kind of look after it. It's easy to kind of write off DJ Webstar as like a one-hit wonder just because of this hit song. And even this particular beat, the thing about Chicken Noodle Soup is it is a good beat, but I don't really rank this beat like a 10 out of 10. I just would have to say it's a good, the more I listen to it, it's kind of like a slow burn kind of hit where the more I listen to it, the more catchy it kind of gets to me, but it's not really like a complete immediate effects just kind of beat on here like Usher's Yeah, or like Usher's Yeah, or Eminem's The Real Slim Shady, or like 50 Cent's In the Club or something like that. It's just those kind of concepts as far as that kind of goes. I just look after it's just kind of one with a little bit more warming up to it kind of pace. And that's just kind of the concept. But the thing about this album is it does have some qualities towards it, but it's just very much like a slow burn and kind of late bloomer, sleeping giant kind of a project, which is too bad, is because I don't know if DJ Webstar was really that annoyed that he didn't have like the breakout success apart from Chicken Noodle Soup. I mean, that was a pretty decently sized hit back in 2006, but it's just the fact that it just really kind of this album pretty much came and went. This is kind of one of the premier reasons, not wholesomely like this album or this song sucks or anything like that, but it's just kind of the concept that there were a lot of lyricists and folks like that that used to say back in 2006, 2007 that hip hop is dead because of all these one hit wonders and dance songs and that type of stuff and ringtone rap that was kind of going around. This, even though this is East Coast sounding, I still feel like Chicken Noodle Soup is basically more of like a ringtone rap kind of song. It's just more kind of lyrical, kind of more thought provoking type stuff compared to some of the snap rap cats from the South and that sort of stuff. So I just look after it. This is kind of the thing about it, but it is pretty solid album. I would have to say I do like it, despite the fact that most of the productions on here are very minimalist and just kind of a little bit janky, a little bit kind of like stark and just kind of not quite jump off the page wholesomely, but it does have some low key kind of buzz that just kind of gives it some vibes. And definitely if you've got like some beers in your system, some good tipsy kind of vibes, if you're at like a dance floor and you're just kind of zoning out a little bit, having a good time, just noticing some of these are definitely some good ones for being out in Philadelphia and New York and Boston and some of those type places to really get cranked to as far as that kind of goes, just with like just for kind of having like a more raving ravenous time at like a dance club. I mean, this album does have more than 2 or 3 or 4 hits for going out and shaking your ass at a dance floor or something like that. But it's just kind of the concept. It's just more East Coast tinge, more lyrical in kind of some senses, and it just kind of has like different kind of vibes compared to like the EDM or like the pop type stuff that typically kind of is faceted throughout most of these parts. But if you're just looking for something with a little bit more like heavy hitting kind of mentality more so than just standard stock ringtone kind of basic rap, this is a good area to turn. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the single on this album. Like I said, there's only one single, and that's Chicken Noodle Soup. So this is a stellar lead single with a catchy overall. With the lead single is also the only single on this album. That's Chicken Noodle Soup. This is a stellar lead single with a catchy overall feel. It's got a nice quick dancing vibe for a night out. And this one kind of has like some fire alarm kind of alarms that you would hear in like a classroom or a school or something like that, or just places where you'd hear fire alarms. It's really kind of it. This is really one that feels pretty much East Coast wholesomely. This is kind of one where it just kind of feels like something like if you were to get Ghostface Killah or Method Man or one of those type folks to kind of do like a dance song. Not to say something as like a jab towards East Coast artists, but this one just does not sound like a Southern beat or a West Coast beat or something like that, or even Midwest. This is very much like song sounds very similar to Beyonce's Ring the Alarm from her B-Day album. This came out right around this time. It's very similar to that one, that same kind of pitch. It's a pretty solid dance song. There's a chick on here named Young B that has a pretty squeaky kind of voice that sounds pretty nice on here. She does a number of songs. It's pretty much her that has a lot of breakout star power. There are some other folks on here that have some star power, but she's pretty good on these songs. It's just too bad that they didn't utilize her to get her more star power. So I would have thought that this actual affable vibes of this particular song would have been catchy if they had had some more follow-up moments. But the thing about Chicken Noodle Soup is just the fact that there's just no real songs like it. I mean, Chicken Noodle Soup is a dance, and it's kind of something that if you look on the internet, you can find and stuff. But there's no other songs on here that kind of have the affability as far as saying, well, you do the chicken noodle soup, but then what happens after that? I mean, at least DJ Unk with his album created 2 of those dances when he did Two Step and Walk It Out, and then he even had a third single which is Hit the Dance Floor as far as that kind of went. But I look after it, they're just I mean, I think that this is a pretty concise kind of time as far as what they were doing with it, but they just didn't have like the motions in motion to really get like a follow-up moment. There should have been. The thing about having like a hit song is like a catchphrase is when you don't have other catchphrases that can kind of be affable that people can say out and about and gossip and that sort of thing. It just kind of particularly kind of snags the album as far as trying to get the highlights. That's this kind of thing. That's kind of what happened with this album. It only had the one single, and this is basically DJ Webstar's biggest hit. Young B, one of her biggest hits, pretty much like her signature song, but it works pretty well. Just an overall good hit, but it's just so short-lived, I would have to say. But it just really sounds like Beyonce's Pound the Alarms. That's a good one. But to kind of talk about the rest of this album, there's 12 songs on here. There's actually 13 songs in this album, but Chicken Noodle Soup, the karaoke instrumental, is also on here. So there's 12 songs. So out of those 12 songs, I recommend at least 7 plus 2 almost songs. So I'll go ahead and recommend those. So those songs would be Chicken Noodle Soup, Don't Stop, In My Video, Like This, Getting Money Over Here, Dollar Bills, Cloud 9, and the 2 almost songs are Fresh and I Came to Dance. So Fresh is kind of a decent snazzy bop in the lyrics, but I feel like the beat kind of plods along a little bit. It's kind of like a C-list kind of social jive. It's just a kind of relatively regular kind of night out bop as far as that kind of goes. This doesn't really have like the complete sheer jump off the page kind of affability about it, but it's just kind of middle of the road. Like a lot of productions on here, some of these just kind of feel a lot more just kind of gummy and not quite as edgy as far as that necessarily is needed, but it's just kind of one where I kind of feel like it's decent enough to kind of listen to for like a relatively solid swag song, but it just doesn't have enough bite to really make it one of the best songs on the album. It's enough to recommend in like a slight sense, but you may find that the beat gets somewhat grating. And then I Came to Dance is another one that's kind of like that. This is kind of a jivey dance highlight. It's a get tipsy bop, I would definitely say, and it's a good turned up song, I would say, but the beat is just not top shelf. This is one that's kind of a little bit clumsy, just kind of plods along a little bit, kind of trips over itself somewhat, but I just would have to say it is a pretty snappy kind of song in terms of like just the ferociousness of it. This is a kind of decently solid song to kick off the album as far as that kind of goes, but for some reason the execution of it, for some reason the beat is just kind of more 6.5 kind of slightly clumsy kind of territory as far as that kind of goes, but it's enough to have kind of like an edge to it to kind of appreciate somewhat. 6.5, 7 out of 10, somewhere in that territory, but it's just not one of the best on here. But then that kind of says a lot about this album, just because a lot of this album kind of is not necessarily bad, but it just is not like, it's really not like a beat enthusiast kind of album as far as that kind of goes. But I look after it, talk about some of these other 7 songs. I did like the kind of drums on In My Video. This is a pretty nice song on here. This is kind of one of the better beats on here apart from Chicken Noodle Soup. This is kind of like a block party dance cut, I would say. It's just for a regular night dance floor hit, and it's affable, but the beat is kind of minimalist. I kind of feel like that's just kind of one where it's a little bit catchier, a little bit snappy as far as that kind of goes. Young B is on here, just like on Chicken Noodle Soup. It's kind of a little bit more affable, kind of hooky somewhat, but it's just kind of still somewhat minimalist, I would say. And then like a real kind of get cranked beat, one of the better beats on here and probably one of the best on the album is Getting Money over here. This is a very warped beat to get cranked to, I would say. It's slinky and has good jovial feelings. Getting Money over here is just a real nice one to kind of get cranked to and just have a good time. Some of these are just kind of amidst the night, like I was saying before, just some good moments for just amidst the night and just really kind of, some of these are really kind of amidst the night, just kind of going until the dance club closes at 3 o'clock in the morning. Sweaty brow, women really dancing hard, twerking hard, that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just some good moments. I do feel like the energy of this album, despite the fact that the beats are not 10 out of 10 top shelf, I do feel like there's enough bite on here to really say that this album is pretty much like damn near a home run with all the dance cuts it kind of has on here. So that's commendable because this keeps up somewhat with DJ Unk. I feel like DJ Unk's probably a little bit better or 2 or 3 steps better, but this is definitely a pretty valiant effort to kind of get just a full album chock full of dance cuts that actually have some rump shakers in here. So that's kind of a good thing. Cloud 9 is a pretty solid one. This is a groovy ladies cut with a plush hook and smooth vibes about it. And it's just good for some sunny commute. It's a sunny commute track for some day haze. This is kind of one that feels like a pretty nice makeshift track to kind of hear on the way home and get ready to step out for the night as far as that kind of goes. Just standard makeshift kind of fare where this one's not amidst the dance floor, but it just kind of has really kind of catchy R&B hook. This Africa Miranda chick is pretty good on here. It's just a pretty good concept as far as getting that one, I would have to say. It's just really kind of, this is another one that reminds me of like New York kind of 90s rap kind of vibes as far as that's concerned, kind of Biggie, Method Man type stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just an overall highlight. Probably need to be more songs like this. This is another good example of like just a kind of bluesy kind of song that just worked extremely well. Out of the blue kind of song. Like This is a thumping vanilla dance boiler. I would say it's an easy track to get turned to, and it has an infectious kind of song pace. This is probably one of the more pounding ones on here. This is another one that I would probably play like 8:30, 9:30 p.m. Not quite as Chicken Noodle Soup or Getting Money over here, but definitely one of the better ones to kind of hear. It's definitely a pretty solid one, and that sort of concept just works extremely well. Don't Stop is a really solid one also. This is a minimalist beat. It's bass heavy, and it's a good track to be wasted to in a late night fare. I would say it's late night fare that goes into the AM. So this is definitely another one to kind of have for just like letting the night crank as far as that kind of goes. Just having overall hits just after one after the other after the other. It's a great one to pair up with In My Video, Don't Stop, Chicken Noodle Soup, Like This, Getting Money over here, and Dollar Bills. All of those are just great ones. About half the album, if not a little bit more, has plenty of pounding dance cuts on here. So that's a good thing. Then Dollar Bills is another nice one. And Dollar Bills is a nice one. This is a nice low-key vocal vibes cut. I would say it's a regular city hopping day kind of feel about it. And this one's just a looking snazzy kind of swag song. So this is definitely one. This one's not quite as much on the dance floor. But I do feel like the vibes about it just really feel kind of typical and day malaise as far as that's kind of concerned. Maybe not so much makeshift, but just kind of the concept of just being out and about and like the traverse of just getting some errand done, paying some bills, visiting a mailbox, getting some snacks, some of those type moments as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of a little bit of day traverse, not so much like a cruising song, but just kind of one that's just kind of a little bit of traverse and just a little bit of errand running. I would say just a regular kind of swag song as far as that kind of goes. So that's just a nice one. So talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here, which were Get Hired, Tone Wop, and Step Out. All of these just kind of had poorer productions that just because the notoriety of the album was so minimalist anyways, just because there wasn't a follow-up to Chicken Noodle Soup. It just kind of made it where a lot of these just really feel like extremists and kind of super hardcore to recommend to other folks as far as trying to get them recommendable and just kind of within a circle as far as trying to mess with them. So it's really kind of the social score is probably going to take a pretty hard dip as far as that kind of goes. But I just would have to say I look after some of these just were not quite edgy enough, and they just did not kind of have like, I mean, I feel like definitely some of these dance club beats, especially when the night keeps going and that things keep getting more unraveled and having a crazier time kind of works. But some of these other ones just didn't really, I mean, I felt like this album kind of struggled to develop an identity as far as that kind of went to really kind of get some other personality apart from songs like Chicken Noodle Soup, especially considering that it didn't have any other singles to really do that. So this is kind of the thing. But In terms of score, I'm going to give this album, me liking at least 7 songs out of 12 plus 2 almost songs. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.25 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty good. I know if I had like truly 9 songs out of 12, I'd probably give it like a 9.5 almost. I wouldn't quite give it a 10 just because of the minimalist kind of promotion and just the overall minimalist kind of productions on here, where there's not really like full blown, for the most part, 10 out of 10 beats on here. But I feel like it is solid enough to recommend. It just kind of has its quirks about it for the most part. They're just kind of somewhat not necessarily incorrigible, but just kind of have tact to kind of deal with. So I just would have to say that's kind of the concept about it. So it gets an 8.25 out of 10. The social score, though, I'm going to give like a 4.5 out of 10 because I just feel like there's just not enough noteworthiness on here. I did notice that Ron Browse was on this album, but he doesn't have auto tune, so I wish he would have had that on here to give him a little bit more like notoriety as far as that kind of went. But I just would have to say that it gets a 4.5 just because Chicken Noodle Soup was the only single it did modestly, and they just didn't really try to push this out much past that. And I just kind of feel like the rest of these songs, they're relatively stark and kind of skeletal productions. Just don't. I mean, this is, if you notice it enough and you have a better ear and you can kind of, if you notice it better and you have a better ear for productions and you can kind of gel with this album a little bit more and you have more of like not just a casual sense of taste in music, you might be able to appreciate this much. You might be able to appreciate this more, but there's just really not like super big names on here for the most part. So this is kind of the thing. So it gets a 4.5 out of 10. In terms of the future, like I said, DJ Webstar does have 2 other albums I'm going to get to as time goes along, but for the most part, he's been kind of quiet. He just kind of vanished for the most part. Like I said, he only has like 3 total hit singles to his name, 1 single off of each of his albums. So that's kind of the situation there. But this is pretty solid. It's good enough to kind of recommend, but just have to understand that it's kind of tougher to recommend in social circles just because it's so minimalist.